How exactly do I create my best selling mini crazy floral bouquet paintings? Come with me behind the scenes as I show you the step-by-step process. And this is vlog number 2. So if you haven't watched the first one, please go ahead and go back and watch number 1 first. And you can see the whole entire process for how I create one of these pieces. And in this video, I actually am going to answer your questions that you had from the first vlog, so I can take you step by step and answer some of your questions for you. Not only that, I'm showing you how the whole collection turned out and showing you all of the different pieces, as well as telling you how many of these minis actually sold in the end. So these are my favorite pieces, and I have now sold over 630 some of these paintings. And when I create them, I always create 10 at a time because this saves time. So let's get started on some of your questions that you have. So if you haven't watched part 1 yet, I like to begin my paintings with painting random shapes in acrylic paint on cradled artboards from Bouquet. I then take these shapes and turn my painting into an abstract still life painting by adding palette knife work over the top of my acrylics. I enjoy working in this way because I actually like working from abstraction. It allows my composition to be different pretty much every time I sit down to paint. I start by drawing out the vase with acrylic markers. And here you can see that I am using my square to draw out the vase. And the reason I do this is because I like to have straight lines in my vases. So now let's get to some of your questions. What brand of acrylic paint do I use? Great question. I like using a range of different brands. I am not nearly as picky about my acrylic paint as I am about my oil paint. My favorite brand, though, of acrylic paint is Holbein, especially their luminous colors. I love their luminous opera, luminous rose, and luminous violet, which I'm sure you can see all of those colors in this background here. I also really love their greenish yellow color. That's one of my favorites. I also just use whatever's cheapest, which sometimes is just Master's Touch from Hobby Lobby. That is their signature brand that you can buy in their store. And that's easy for me because I have a Hobby Lobby right down the street. I also have a few colors of Charvin acrylics that I use. Especially their Eva Pink is one of my favorite colors, period. I have a tube of their acrylic paint, and then I also use that color in their oil paint. But I actually don't buy all expensive acrylics. I only have like two or three colors that I buy with that are Charvin because I just like to save money somewhere. And then I also have maybe just a few golden acrylics. I'm not really a big golden person overall, so I don't really spend a lot of money on golden acrylics. The other brand that I will occasionally purchase is Winsor Newton. They make a pretty great acrylic, and like I said, I'm really not as picky about my acrylic paint. In my opinion, it's better to have a cheaper acrylic paint and spend my money on oil paints. Moving on to the next question. How many layers of acrylic paint do I use for the background? I had to actually stop and think through that for a minute because I don't usually pay attention, but it's probably right around 5 to 6 layers of acrylic paint, depending on how much I like the balance of colors that I'm getting in my shapes. And each layer of acrylic paint might have 3 or 4 colors, but they're always colors that blend well together. And I think that's kind of part of the key to building the backgrounds. So say, for example, when I am painting the pinks, I usually do 3 to 5 shades of pinks in varying hues. And this is actually what gives the shapes dimension in the backgrounds. And so, I will probably start with pinks and just a touch of orange, and then I will move on to yellows, and then I will move on to purples and blues, and then blues mixed with greens, and then usually I actually come back to pinks again just to make sure that I have enough. Have you figured out that my favorite color is pink yet? So I just want to take a minute and speak to what I'm actually doing in the video right now. And if you didn't watch the first video, this is the part that I have so much fun with. I'm actually masking in the background of my still life painting here. This is an abstract floral, and I find that I am really all about studying shapes in composition. And so this is one of those things that just fascinates me, and pretty soon I'm going to start adding more oil paint to the shapes in the center to actually build up my flowers here. Next question. Do I use sources for these paintings? At least I think that was the question this person was asking. No, I do not. And that is the interesting part about this process. I am just letting my imagination run wild and letting the background and the shapes speak to me by turning those shapes into flowers. Do I ever use sources for my paintings? Yes, I do for my other processes and those other styles. But those paintings are a completely different style of painting. This just reminds me of something that I teach my students inside of my mentorship programs about the fact that there are actually 2 types of artists. Those who are the go with the flow artist, and those who are the planners. Go with the flow artists rarely like to paint from an actual source. They just like to go with the flow, while planners tend to need an inspiration photo or a source in order to paint. I am a little bit of both. I can move back and forth from one to the other. Planners 100% get stressed out if they have to paint from their imagination or just go with the flow in their painting process. And I just want to say neither one is right or wrong, just different. But it's important to understand which one you are, so just so that you know. I actually used to be a planner before my brain injury, and I could only ever make art if I had a reference photo or a source to create from. And now, after my car accident and my brain injury, I can actually just sit down and start painting something purely out of my imagination or out of my head, and I don't need a source image. Do you use up all of your oil paint? I had someone who was super stressed out by all of the paint on my palette. And I just want to remind you that this is oil paint and not acrylics. The oil paint will actually stay good on my palette for 1 to 2 weeks. So I'm actually not really nervous about making sure that I use all of the paint, and I promise you that it was not thousands of dollars of paint on my palette here. I know that oil paint can be a little bit pricier than acrylic paint, but the tubes that I use are probably right around $18 per tube of paint. Remember that these are highly textured paintings, and some of these colors actually will be completely gone by the end of painting 10 of my paintings. This is another reason why you should actually work on more than one painting at a time so that you don't waste paint. Sometimes I will even take the leftover paint and add it onto an abstract palette painting just to use it all up. And I have even sold my wooden palettes in the past just so that it doesn't feel like I'm wasting paint. But I suppose that I would never paint if I was always worried about wasting money or wasting paint. But I also completely understand your nervousness and your anxiety around this. And the only solution I have for you is, if that's your concern, maybe just don't use as much paint as I am. Although I will say, like I said at the beginning, I end up using a lot of this paint that's already down on my palette. Moving along to the next question, do you find that your boards move around when you wire them first? And that's such a great question because I don't know that I've ever actually thought about that. And I don't know if I shared in my last video why exactly I need to wire the back of my paintings. But no, I actually don't feel like the wire really does anything in terms of making my board slide around any more than usual. And the reason why I wire the back is because I don't have a surface that I can lay all of my boards out to dry. And I have to actually hang my paintings on the wall in order for them to dry. And if I did not wire the back of my paintings when I do, it would be a little bit trickier to hang on the wall. I guess you could hang the paintings without the wire. I know some people can do that. So I don't know. This is just what I have found works for me personally and how I have perfected my process as an artist. Someone else wanted to know my brand of drill that I use, which I thought was just such a funny question, but I will go ahead and answer it. I'm I'm looking at the drill and it says Metabo HPT, and I have no idea what that means, but I do have a funny story about drills. So when I first started selling my art, my mom, who at the time was a professional artist, she used to get mad at me because I used to sell my paintings and never wire the backs of them. And so she told me, Wendy, you have to wire the back of your paintings if you're going to sell them. And because she lived close to me, right up the street, I used to make her come wire the back of my paintings every time I sold another painting. And it was really funny because it got old really quickly. And I think because I really started selling a lot more of my art, she eventually, for my birthday one year, purchased for me a birthday gift. And guess what was in my birthday gift? My very own drill and set of hardware and everything in this cute little toolkit, everything that I needed to begin wiring the back of my paintings myself. And that drill ended up lasting me for quite a while until my husband started looking at it and going, you really need a much better drill than this small little one that your mom bought. And so that the one that I use now is the one that he purchased for me. And so I would have never had any idea what drill to purchase, but that's what he got for me. I had someone else comment about my pricing and the fact that it is super low for an oil painting. And yes, I completely agree with you on that. My paintings are worth way more than I sell them for. But at the same time, I sell a lot of them. I enjoy making my art affordable, and most of my customers are artists who take my online art courses. I enjoy selling a lot of my art, and for me, it's actually more about releasing my art into the world and getting into the creative flow. So yes, I choose to sell my art at a much more affordable rate, but I am also in the process of consistently raising my prices as I go. And when I first started, I actually only was able to sell art prints and have continued to just gradually scale my business because it actually works that way. And so a lot of times what I tell newer artists is to start with a smaller price point, whether it's a collection of cards, a collection of prints, and get to the place in your business where you consistently sell that one specific thing and then continue to scale up from there. And I have just been doing that in my business, and it seems to be working fairly well for me. And I just love my customers and my collectors so much. I feel like pricing is just one of the most personal things for artists, and some artists just are not willing to part with their art for a certain amount, and then there's other artists like me who would just rather get my art out into the world because it makes me happy. But also, as a side note, it is one of my goals to continue to scale and build. And within the next year or so, I am hoping to raise my prices considerably and start selling exclusively from my own website and possibly doing some larger scale abstract paintings. Next question was, do you ever leave any of the acrylic paint showing through? And hopefully you can see as I am building this piece, which I absolutely love this painting so much. I think this is one of my favorite ones from this collection of paintings. I don't know what it is. I feel like it just is extremely loose and free. And then I think I like when there's just this spontaneity to it. And so this is one of my favorites from this collection. But yes, I actually do leave the acrylic paint showing through in different areas, especially around the vases and in different areas. Like, I don't know if you can see that yellow flower that's sort of in the center there. I think I'm almost 100% sure, no, maybe like 70% sure that that yellow flower is mostly acrylic paint. But yeah, I do like to have certain areas, and it's actually kind of cool because when you look at them close up in person, you can actually see the different spots where the acrylic paint is showing through in different pockets. And it kind of provides almost like this contrast between the texture of the oil paint and then the lower layers of the acrylic paint. So those are all of the questions that I'm going to be answering for you today. Thank you everyone for the feedback and for all of the questions. And let me know if there's anything else that you want to know about this particular process at all. So how exactly did I find a process that fits my style? Let's dive a little bit deeper. So I am working on one of my 10 crazy floral bouquet minis, and I just thought I would mention something really quickly since I am probably about halfway through now. But as I was piecing together the composition of this piece, I really just wanted to point something out as I am painting this one. And that is, I think for these pieces, one of my favorite things to really focus on is the actual shape of the bouquet. And that's why I love masking in the background color, because it's almost like this, I don't know, it's just so incredibly satisfying. As soon as I start masking in the background and turning some of these elements into flowers, there's just something about it that just makes me incredibly happy. And I think I'm just wanting to mention that because I think sometimes when artists sit down to paint, they don't necessarily know how to find that thing in their creative process that is so deeply satisfying. And I just want to encourage you that if you haven't found that thing yet, to just keep going and keep trying lots of different processes and, you know, mix it up. Try different ways of creating your pieces, whether it's, you know, changing the order that you create in. Like if you always start from a drawing, try starting from an abstract piece. If you always start from abstract or, you know, whatever, try starting with lines. I think that's one of the things that I have learned how to do really well is I have learned how to mix up my process just by changing the order that I create in. And so for me, I just absolutely love the studying the interlocking relationship of shape. And so this composition or this way of creating, I should say, it just never gets old for me because I just love it so much. And I think partly because every time I do it, it turns into something completely different. And that, I think, is what has enabled me to create so many of these pieces. So I just wanted to mention that because this is the part that is getting me so excited, is really just allowing for this bouquet and for the shape to take place. And then I'm probably going to add some leaves coming down, and I don't know. I'm actually really excited about this one, and in just a minute I will show you all of the finished pieces. And again, if you have not taken my art style quiz where you can discover what your favorite top elements of art are, I have a link in the description for you to go ahead and take that quiz, and then you can figure out what your driving or your top art element is for your specific style and the way that you like to create. And I just want to say, sometimes those things change, right? It's okay if you come back in a year and realize, hey, you know what? I used to love, texture, but now I really am wanting to focus a little bit more on value. So it's not like it's written in stone. It's just giving you a few clues about where you should start. So if I took the quiz and my top art element was value, then I'm going to spend a lot of time focusing on capturing dark to light. I'm probably going to want a medium or a supply that enables me to do that, such as, I don't know, like watercolor or oil paint. Probably not, you can use acrylics, but acrylics are harder to express value. You have to use lots and lots of layers, and then you can get there. But anyways, you want to take some time after you figure out what your top art element is to really hone it in on that one thing even more. Because I'm telling you, when you learn how to build skills in just one of the elements, not that you're ever only using just one, but let's say line is really important to you and you spend like time sketching every single day, then you're gonna get really good at line work. And then you can continue to expand and grow. And then maybe down the road, you might want to focus on, I don't know, shape then, right? And then you can incorporate shape and line together. And through that process of focusing on those individual elements of art, you can really build a style that is completely unique to you. And no matter whether you are, have learned from other artists, you can learn how to innovate your own process to incorporate different elements of different artists, right? And so, taking maybe just one thing that you learned from an art class and incorporating that, into your process, right? So maybe this masking process is something that you enjoy doing, but you make it with landscapes or with something else, right? And so that is, or maybe you do the masking without texture. Maybe you're just focused on shapes, and then you're painting, a really flat layer, not flat. You're painting a smooth layer without texture to it with your paintbrush, okay? And, you can still use this technique of masking, but maybe you're not into the texture and you're just focused on shape, and maybe you want to focus more on space. I don't know. So the exciting thing is that this actually helps your brain to kind of break down, okay, these are the art elements, and I am going to dive deeper into the skills of each one that I enjoy working with the most. And so, for example, let's say texture ends up being a really important thing to you, then you can explore all sorts of different ways for making texture, because it's not just oil paint. I mean, you can use encaustic, you can use fabrics, you can use acrylic mediums, you can, you can even create some kinds of texture just through the way that you layer your line work on top of one another. And so I invite you to go ahead and go take my quiz and see what comes up, because you just never know what is actually really calling you. And then once you take the quiz, you can really start looking at art differently, because you'll be able to see something and you'll recognize, oh, I do really like that painting because I love the color palette that the artist is using, or I really love the way that artist is capturing a sense of light to dark. And it really does help you actually look at art through a new and different lens. So I will leave the link to that in the caption. And here is the final 10 mini crazy floral bouquet paintings. I really loved this set. I think there's some really great ones in here. And remember, if you want to learn this process, I have a course. It's called Crazy Floral Bouquet, and the link will be in the caption. And I really go way more in depth on supplies and process and everything you need to know. And I even make some bigger paintings as well in that course. So each group or each collection has almost just a different focus or a different feel. Sometimes I try to loosen up more in a collection. Sometimes they all end up much tighter. And what I think is interesting is that the first one that I did for all of you seemed to be fairly neat and fairly pretty, if you would want to call it that. I feel like the composition is a little bit more on the, what's the word that I'm looking for? On the like tighter side. It's not super loose and crazy and all over the place. And so as I was progressing through the compositions, I really made an effort to kind of loosen up a little bit more. And this one that I'm going to share with you is my favorite one of the collection. And the reason that I like it so much, I think, is because the shapes feel very unconventional and it feels a lot more abstract as opposed to perfect. And that was really what I was going for, was just a really different kind of composition than what I normally do. And so, like I was saying, what I like to do is I hang them on the wall and then I kind of study them for a bit. And especially if some of them end up not selling, I will end up tweaking the composition and whatever. So this one I think is my favorite one of this collection, and that's because there was something really satisfying about the way that all the shapes sort of fit together. And that's why I like making paintings in this process, because I just like taking something that is this like abstract shapes on boards and then turning it into something else. And I don't know, there's just something really playful about working in this way. And so, like I was saying, it's just really, really satisfying. And then the one piece where I was talking to you about just the process, that one I feel like I like the least. Let me get it real fast. And it's this one, and I feel like there are parts of it that I really do appreciate. I like all of the, I don't know, I liked creating it. Let's just say that. I had fun making it. The parts that I feel like really need some work is, I feel like the composition needs some more balance. And sometimes that doesn't really matter. Like, I just move on with life, right? And this piece may or may not sell, and I may or may not tweak areas of it. But this is the whole goal about doing these pieces, is to get better as an artist. And so the more that I do, the better I can see the compositions and what will work and what won't. And every once in a while I get a piece that I just don't absolutely love. And that's okay, because we are humans and this is part of having an imperfect practice. And the other thing that I don't really love about it, I feel like the balance is off a little bit, but also the colors are not really what I love. And I think it's because this dark blue background with this yellow is not really working for me. Even though, I don't know, there's just something about the color palette that just feels off. Even when I use the same colors in other paintings, it has more to do with the amount of each color. And so I've already been sort of trying to tweak the composition by making this flower over here bigger. I almost feel like I need to edit some of the areas back out, like maybe up here in the corner or over here. I'm not entirely sure, but it's one of those things where you just have to study it. And, you know, it's you can't treat your art like it's so incredibly precious. Stop treating it like it's precious, because the more that you do, the better you're going to get. And so this is just one tiny little blip on my whole creative timeline. And this is just one little painting. And what I encourage artists to do is just, even if you have one piece that you don't like, just keep going, because you'll eventually get better. So this one I feel like needs some help, and I think I'm going to edit the corner somehow. But anyways, I went ahead and I listed all the pieces in my Etsy shop. I will put the link in my profile so you guys can go look. Maybe by the time you're watching this, they'll most likely already be sold, but who knows. What I do is I send out just an email to my collector list, and I'll also try to leave that link in the description as well. I will let my collectors know that there are new paintings available, and I give them a good head start before I let my Instagram know. And then, maybe later tonight or tomorrow, I will let all of my Instagram followers know that these pieces are available for purchase. And usually, like I said, it depends on the season and how many active collectors I have, but they usually sell out within a few days, if not the first few days, within a week or so. And so how did this collection of art actually do? And if you remember, I always release a collection of 10 of my minis all at the same time. And this group actually sold within 24 hours of me putting it out. So that was really exciting. It doesn't always happen that quickly. Sometimes it takes more like a week, and a lot of different factors play into that, like when was the last time I listed a group and how much interest I have in my minis at the time. And I will just say that I think 4 of them sold to returning customers and collectors who buy from me on a regular basis. So that just shows, and I think overall, my sales for repeat buyers are like the 75% 80 range. And so most of my sales happens with returning buyers. And so I just want to mention that, and also just say that one of the surprising things that happened in this group of paintings, I don't know if you remember the ones that I just shared with you, but the one that I liked the least, this navy blue one behind me, that one sold first. Shocking, which I'm always surprised by what speaks to people, because it's never exactly what I think it's going to be. And then my favorite one, the pink one that I shared with you, actually was one of the last ones to sell. So that just goes to show you that you never know exactly what paintings are going to speak to who and why. And so also, it really is powerful working in collections, and it's how I have built my online sales business. So thanks so much for watching. Let me know if you have any other questions about this process or about the marketing part of selling my minis.